Hello there, welcome to another Criterion Memories interview. We're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the Criterion Theatre. And today I'm speaking with John Ruscoe. Hello, John.
Hello, Jamie.
How are you?
I'm getting older, but apart from that, I'm fine, thank you.
Wonderful. Um, I'm getting used to just jumping in. I mean, you've got such a rich history at the Criterion. Um, do you remember how did you end up there? How did you land there?
I can't absolutely remember, except that it involved drinking. Uh, and I think Keith Railton was also involved at the time, but we used to go into the bar. We were already involved in theatre at that time anyway. And in those days, the Criterion had a very thriving youth group, and we got involved with them and were dragged along to the bar and quite enjoyed the atmosphere of the bar as well as what the bar was selling. So I think that was the start of it. Yeah.
In those days, you could drag the youth group into the bar, could you? That was a thing. They don't
The,
let you
the,
do that anymore.
no, there didn't seem to be a problem in those days. I think, yes, I was certainly underage at the time.
So did you have ambitions to be on stage or?
Yes, since I was quite young, actually, my dad used to take me over to Stratford from quite an early age to see productions over there. And it was always magical. And it was one of those things of, I want to be a part of this. And I think that kind of started it off, really. That was a long time ago. I think I'd made that decision probably by the time I was about 12 that I actually wanted to be a part of it and to know what went on and how it worked. And that was really important to me and remains so.
Hmm. So you were involved with the youth group, or you were? I've got
Um,
looking at the
not
archive. I've got you involved in stuff in the sort of mid '60s. Is that?
Yeah, the timing's about right. I'm not quite sure if I can remember what I was involved in. I don't think I did a great deal with the youth group. Um, I came in and I think there were a couple of productions where maybe I played some small part. I don't remember anything
I've got you down as a soldier in the wall.
particularly. And then I was asked to be in a production in the main house. That would have been 66 maybe. I think that was the first one I did there.
Yeah, I've got you down as a soldier in the wall. Johnny Lee in How Are You, Johnny? And Barney in Simon and Laura. If do any of those ring a bell?
Yeah, vaguely. I don't remember the soldier in the wall. I remember the wall, but I didn't know I was in it. Um, How Are You, Johnny? I remember. And the Simon and Laura one, I vaguely remember. I had a very small part in that, I think. One of those things of they were looking around for someone to fill in, and I happened to be there at the wrong time. So I ended up playing a very small part in that, I think.
Yes, there's one. I think there's one picture on the archive of you in How Are You, Johnny, um, with Tony Hayden.
Tony Hayden, Alan Warren, somebody, Jill Chamberlain or somebody Chamberlain. They were twins. I got used to get them mixed up. And Chris, who is still, I think, a member, played, I think, my mother in that. Chris Harris.
Chris Harris.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
Jill
all I
Cham-
can remember. There may have been, oh, and John Walters was in it too.
Well, you see, you say that's all I can remember, but that's the entire cast of that production.
Is it?
There were
Oh,
six,
I've done very well.
and it was Jill Chamberlain and not Neville.
Oh,
You've done it right. So yeah, that's pretty impressive. And then you it looks like you had a period away.
yes. I went off to drama school, and then I worked in rep for a while, and then I came out of the acting world and eventually moved back to Coventry. And the obvious place to go back was to the Criterion, not particularly because of the theatre aspect, but mainly because a lot of old friends were still there. And that was quite important to me at the time. A lot of friends there that I'd known for a while, and soon made lots of new friends with newer members of the company. And that's always been the case.
And you primarily, I think, you're known as a director, as well as being a fantastic actor. But I think over the years, certainly the years that I've been involved with the Criterion, you are sort of known as a director. How quickly did you get into that? Was that something that you did
fairly quickly, I think? And I think that would have been sometime in the late 70s. And I think I kind of slid into it because I was asked to do something. And so I gave it a go and actually found that I liked it. And eventually, I think I found that I preferred it to acting. And in those days, when you've got other commitments, as I did, you have to limit the time available for doing things at the theatre and the time available for doing other things. And it was a case of, well, if I've only got 2 plays a year, for example, what do I spend them doing? Do I act or do I direct? And the choice soon became very clear that if I was going to use those times, then I wanted to direct rather than to act. And I think I kind of fell out of acting, and I think I'd stopped enjoying it by that time, to be perfectly honest. It's an awful lot of work that involves you looking into yourself, and that's not always very pleasant. And again, when you've got other commitments, work, family, that kind of thing, to do it and to do it well, you need a lot more time. And I think that's always the problem with amateur theatre.
Yeah, I mean, I think people don't really understand how big a commitment it is to, to even do a small part in a play is still, giving up a lot of time. And I mean, obviously the week that it's actually in production, but almost certainly most of the week before that, probably most of the week before that, and then at least 2-3 nights a week, kind of early.
Yeah, I think for being an actor, most people see it as being a case of learning your lines, which can be enough. But then there's an awful lot of thinking time around that you have to put in. Unfortunately, and again, it's a perennial problem with amateur theatre. People can't do it. They have work commitments, they have family commitments. When do they get the space to do that? What tends to happen is that people eventually learn their lines, and any other thinking time tends to be during rehearsals, which is not really how it should be, in my view. That there needs to be an awful lot of homework done by the actor, who then brings that homework to the rehearsal, and it then becomes a matter for discussion with the director, with the other actors, and it progresses on from there. If you don't do that thinking around the character, then I think it does limit what you're going to end up with, but it's inevitable in an amateur background.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were very lucky. I mean, I've always felt that I was very lucky to be at the theatre when we had quite a few people around that had trained, that had actually gone off and studied, yourself included, and then sort of brought back that knowledge and taught it to other people, about how much work you have to do outside. I remember lots of rehearsals with you where you were talking about intention, and if you were playing a character, all of the bits that weren't the words, like you actually had to think like the character, and there weren't many people there were some people who could just turn up and kind of do it and say the words, and some people it meant a lot more to them.
Yeah. I mean, I think I was very lucky. I went to a drama school which at the time was fairly fresh, a place called the Drama Centre. It had a strong background in the philosophies of Stanislavski, which became known as the method, and can be misinterpreted by, and has been misinterpreted by, an awful lot of people. But the basis of everything, I believe, is behind that method. And it became very important to me working with actors, and that's the bit I enjoy, is to try and help them find their characters in ways perhaps they hadn't thought of. The Stanislavski method is no great secret to it. It's basically common sense. But the number of people who go on stage and think that learning the lines is enough, and for the rest of it, they'll just show off. It does happen. It does happen. And it's actually getting an actor to think in different ways about the approach to a part that I actually find the most interesting part of it. And to help them along the way if I can, using the experience that I had, which I have to say at the time was fairly mind-blowing to me, and it was like the road to Damascus, if you like. But that's always been an interest of mine, in the techniques behind it and the approach to a role. And I've always tried to share that with actors. It's never quite gone as far as I would have liked it to go, but I stay true to an awful lot of those principles, if not all of them, and always will do, I think, because my belief is that the Stanislavski method is the basis of every approach to theatre from an actor's point of view. And it's been tremendously helpful to me. And as a director, it keeps you on your toes. It helps you to examine what you're doing and why. And again, for an actor, that's invaluable, to stand back and test what they're doing. And if they don't have the tools to test what they're doing, they will never know how they can improve. I suppose, sorry, Jamie.
No, sorry.
I suppose I would, my ideal theatre is an ensemble theatre, where it's not only a part of somebody playing a lead one week and a small part the next week. It's about working together in the same way, speaking the same language, having a very similar approach. And my dream always with the Criterion was that maybe one day we would get there, or somewhere near that. And that never really has happened. I have to say that I think that's probably, you know, my early dreams have changed slightly. And I have to say I was quite young and innocent when I had that kind of dream of the place. Totally unrealistic, really. But nevertheless, I think still there is room for us as a company to improve what we do as actors, as directors, whatever it may be. And I'm sad that we've never quite got to that stage. Occasionally it happens, occasionally.
Let's talk about when we got close, in your opinion. I mean, looking through the list of productions that you've been involved with, an awful lot of them jump out as things that in other interviews people have said, oh yeah, that's the one that I remember. You know, they come up a lot. Which are your favorites, before I embarrass you with mine?
Favorites of things I've done, or favorites of anything I've seen there?
Anything you've seen, or things that you've done? Let's start with things that you've done, because
that's really difficult. Because I wouldn't presume to judge something I've done myself. That's not for me to do. That's for other people to do. If they enjoyed it, if they got something from it, then that's great. But you know, it's gone now, and I could never look at it and stand back and judge it dispassionately, obviously.
What's
But
the worst thing? What's the worst thing you think you've ever done? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
the worst thing, no, I couldn't possibly say that. There have been a few that haven't been great.
I'm not
A few,
necessarily what you think that. What are some things that you've really enjoyed doing? Let's say, rather than, you know, we're not critically acclaimed.
again, that's very difficult to be specific about one particular production, because I have to say that I tend to get something out of any production. It may be the way a certain actress progressed throughout rehearsals. It may be the look of the thing. It may be keeping true to a style. It may be performances or getting a certain message across. So there's something from everything. I mean, clearly there are productions I remember fondly and productions perhaps I remember less fondly. And it goes back a long way. So I don't know. I was very pleased to have done a play called Bent in early 1983, I think it was, something like that. And I think we were the amateur premiere of that production. A very hard-hitting piece set in Nazi Germany, and very much to do with the persecution, particularly of gay people at that time. And I think at that time that we did it, it was kind of something fresh to be performed at the Criterion. I don't think it was quite daring in some ways, and I was very pleased that we'd actually got the performing rights to do it, and it was something that I felt was worth doing. I don't think we got wonderful audiences, mainly because of its subject matter. But it was a production I was pleased about in a number of different ways, including a couple of performances. And there was one by an actor who no longer works with the Criterion, Jim Connery, which I thought was remarkable, but he was a remarkable actor. There was another one by playing opposite him by an actor called Pete Wood, who's sadly no longer with us. And whereas with Jim, he was well on the way in terms of understanding how to get towards a character, Pete wasn't. But he worked hard. He worked very hard. And it was a stunning performance, I thought. Other things, there are different things that I enjoy. A couple of things that I did with your mum.
I was going to say, it's a remarkable variety of things that you've done. So something like Bent, and then, you know, musical.
Yeah. Well, I enjoy that also. I don't like particularly doing just one type of thing. I quite enjoy the variety. But doing Blood Brothers, and later on, much later on, Piaf, with your mum playing leads in each of those. I have very fond memories of those productions.
Blood Brothers was also an amateur premiere, wasn't it? Blood Brothers?
Yes, it was. Yes. Yeah, the full version. We did the full version, and that was an amateur premiere. I don't think we were able to bill it because I think there was a school's version where it had been tried out beforehand, but it wasn't the full version that we did. And we did it just before it got taken up by, I think, Bill Kenwright, and eventually made its way to the West End, by which time it had become glamorized to a degree that I didn't think was necessary. But that was great fun. Not the greatest piece ever, but a lot of fun to do, and had a big effect on audiences, I think. And then Piaf, which, I mean, the joy of that one was that it was almost impossible to do. So it's finding your way around that and finding how do I deal with that? Because we can't do it that way because of what we have at the Criterion or who we have sometimes. How do we change it? How do we adapt it? And I think somehow we found a way around that, and it seemed to work. And again, I enjoyed doing that, and I enjoyed that process. Putting something together and finding solutions to problems that are in the script, I really quite enjoy.
I think The Madness of George III as well would be one that,
Oh yes,
that many people have mentioned. Again, that must be in a similar fashion to Piaf. It's that how on earth do you go about, like, can we actually do this as an amateur theatre with the amount of people and
yeah.
costume and
I think it wasn't so much as how you could do it. It was more a case of who have we got to do it, and I think we had to kind of look in cupboards for people, because it was quite a large cast, if I remember. Quite a lot of them without an awful lot of experience. And it was putting that bit together, I think, that was difficult. But the running of it, I think once you got the pace of it and you'd found a way with a set whereby things could move from one scene to another very quickly, that was relatively straightforward. But it was the casting of it, I think, was the biggest problem there. I mean, we were very lucky that we got Keith Railton, who was playing George III, and once you've got that, that's a good start. No, there were others too, obviously, in that production. John Withers being another one. Again, you've got two very solid actors there, and others coming through who have gone on to do more since then. John Elves was another actor in that. So we had some very good people in there, but we had a lot of people with little or no experience, and that was quite interesting at times.
What about stuff that you weren't involved with? Are there things that you remember and kind of remember?
Yeah. There's things I remember for good and bad, and I won't go into detail on the things I didn't enjoy so much, but one of the earliest things, and I think I was kind of a student at the time, so I wasn't around when it was being rehearsed, but I came to see it out of interest, was the Marat Sard, and that must be going back to the 60s or early 70s,
Yeah.
60s, I think. It was Jeff Bennett's production of the Marat Sard, and what I really enjoyed about that is that you couldn't see the seams. The performances overall were excellent, and it was using a cast with varied experience. And I thought they made a really good job of that production. That's going back a long, long way, but I do remember that.
1968, I think.
Was it? Ah, right. Going on from there, other things that stay in my mind. Again, there's a contrast here. Something like Private Lives, for example. I remember Gene Warren did a very good production of Private Lives, again involving Keith Railton. Moira Farah was in that also. Very, very good production of that. More recently, thinking back over recent years, there was a very good production of a play I actually didn't like or didn't get, perhaps is more to the point, which was Let the Right One In, which was about vampires. Now, I'm not into vampires. I hope I never will be. And I didn't quite get it, but I have to say I thought it was an excellent production. That was Anne-Marie Green who directed that. Another one, which was, I think, not long after, again, the play itself, I'd got one or two issues with, but I thought the production was excellent, and that was Road. I think that was Craig Shelton and Jenny Holmes doing a joint production. So, I mean, those are a few of the things I've enjoyed. There have been an awful lot more, and I hope I can be forgiven for not remembering all of them.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, you know, I think your credits, you're listed in, I think, 62 productions across, well, 50 years,
Is it that
45
many?
years,
Good grief.
55 years, in fact.
But I'm
So
not that old.
no, you were just in tiny shorts in your first right through until the 80s, I would imagine. Um, uh, what about other things at the Criterion? I mean, we always talk. You mentioned a little bit about remembering the people. Um,
Hmm.
you know, when you came back, they were still there, and most of them are still there. God willing. You know, we've lost some people along the way, but you know, as a sort of social network, um, that's kind of a completely other side to the Criterion.
It's a very important side, very important to me. I know others who've said exactly the same thing, but it's part of my family. I see the Criterion members as part of my family, and the place itself has been there now for a very long time, and I've been to that place for a very long time, and I've made some very good friends there. Um, and to me, they are part of the family. I'm an only child. I don't have lots of brothers and sisters running around. My equivalent, I suppose, would be people I've known at the Criterion over the years. Some are still with us, some have departed for various reasons and in various ways. But it's always been very important to me from that point of view. And I remember when I was a lot younger, and actually it's still the case, I enjoy going down there and finding somewhere where I can talk to people about theatre. And um, there have been times when there have been people who have seen an awful lot of theatre, and we can talk about performances and who's been in it and what the production did, that sort of thing. I've always enjoyed that. I think, sadly, that doesn't seem to be the case so much nowadays. Um, I think I find it quite sad that now the conversation tends to be around television or film. And whilst there's nothing at all wrong with that, and whilst both have got an awful lot to offer, obviously, theatre is something quite different.
Mm.
The whole experience to me of going to a theatre is quite different from watching something on the telly or going to a cinema to see it. It's the immediacy of it, and it's the daringness of the production. And it doesn't people don't tend to go to theatre now. People who are members of the Criterion don't tend to go to theatre now as much as they did, which I think is very sad. Um, I think, there are all sorts of reasons why not, and clearly going to the theatre is not a cheap experience nowadays. Um,
I mean,
there are
also
also
as a matter of note, we should point out that for the last 2 years, almost for the last 18 months, we've been in a global pandemic, and there's been no theatre at all possible
no,
um,
no.
as a bonus.
I mean, I find it difficult now to go simply because of my deafness. And I find that is a major barrier to me enjoying live theatre anymore, which I find tremendously sad. Um, the Criterion, I have to say, has a very good hearing loop, and thank goodness for that. It's kept me going through many productions, whether it's been those I've been directing or those I've been watching. But the hearing loop in the Criterion is fantastic. Not many people seem to do that. And that, to me, would be a big letdown if I went to a theatre, as I have done, and virtually sat in silence for most of it. So one has to think that, well, that's my disability these days, and it's a shame that more people don't take note of it. But there are certain things that I wouldn't dream of going to see, knowing that there's a high likelihood that there won't be any kind of hearing loop or something that will help me. If you pay an awful lot of money to see something, you expect to hear it as well. And I find it tremendously sad that I don't get the same experience nowadays.
There's
Not all the
quite
time.
there's quite a lot of, I think theatre in general has become better, more accessible in terms of offering. Sometimes they'll offer sign language, but that's not
Yeah,
necessarily useful because not everybody that has a hearing difficulty knows sign language. And subtitles or surtitles often get used. But yeah, the loop system's been in the Criterion for a lot longer than you'd
absolutely.
expect, because
Yeah, yeah.
we'd often joke that we were behind the times on an awful lot of things.
I think the only drawback with the loop system is that it works very well if the actors are somewhere near the microphones. If
Yes,
if they're not in an area covered by a mic, it's sometimes difficult. But I think the loop at the Criterion seems to have improved in recent years, and that's less the case now. It's you tend to hear much more of the play than you used to. At one point, if somebody turned in a certain direction, for me, they would just be mouthing it. Um,
I
but
do
yeah,
remember. I enjoyed many productions at the Criterion, listening to the wonderful Jeff Eames's hearing aid when he was on front of house, or he would be on the bar. You could stand near him, and he'd be getting the live feed from the.
oh yes, I'm able to do that now. In fact, the best place to hear a play is behind the door leading from the bar into the back of the auditorium. Uh, if I've directed something, and I tend to nip in and out and watch little bits once the play's on, and it used to be a case of hovering near the door and poking my head through to see where they'd got to. But now I know exactly, because I just stand by the door near the bar, and I can hear exactly where they're up to at any time once I've switched into the right channel. But yeah,
It's interesting that I think we share that, possibly for slightly different reasons, but I know that you didn't like to. There are some directors that want to be in the theatre every night, like in the audience, watching it every night. I get absolutely bored with anything that I've directed. I generally watch the first night, and then um,
yeah,
I'll check in the week, and
yeah. I think I'm the same, Jamie. Sometimes you're quite glad to see the first night, because by that time you may be bored with it. And having spent the latter part of rehearsal where you're watching it every single night, and you think, no, God, not again. You're quite glad after the first night's over. And I would always go in on the first night, because I believe that that's me showing solidarity with
yeah,
the cast. So I wouldn't dream of not going in for the first night. But having done that, I tend to dip in and out. I can't leave it alone until it's over. So I tend to be down at the theatre most nights when it's on,
yeah.
and I will usually watch bits. Some bits will be because I enjoy them. Some bits will be because I've got a concern with how it's being played, and I want to try and solve that problem, and then talk to the actors involved about it. But no, I have done recently a couple of times, sat in again to watch the whole thing, usually because I've taken one of my children, and you feel, well, I can't just throw them in and leave them there. So I have watched more than once on a few recent occasions, but not something I particularly want to do once it's up and running.
No. For those that don't know the Criterion, the two classic spots are the door at the back of the auditorium that has a small curtain that's closed during the production, and you'll often find a nervous director kind of
Yeah.
peeking through the curtains just to check, that things are going all right. Or sometimes
Yeah.
in the wardrobe window, you can go up into the wardrobe and peer in through the window, but you can't really hear it from there. Although I suppose you could.
No, I don't go. I used to go up to the sound box and watch bits from there, and then I think it was made clear to me that I sometimes got in the way by the people who were working up there. So I kind of not done that for many years. I just tend to poke my head through the curtain. Well, not poke my head, but just draw the curtains aside slightly so I can peep through to see how something's going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you got any? I always like to ask if people have got amusing anecdotes, and then I worry that they might say no, and it will all die a death. But you must have the amount of time spanned. You must have some hilarious anecdote that we can, some YouTubeable viral story to be told.
No.
Okay.
Oh, well, actually, yeah, I've got an awful lot, and I won't bore you with all of them. And in fact, it would be a mistake for me to tell you some of those on video. Thinking back, and it goes back to a production I did many years ago of a play by Ken Campbell, a children's play by Ken Campbell called Old King Cole. And the first performance was a matinee. And playing one of the leads in that was an actor called Colin Campbell. And at one point during the play, he had to pick up a chair and smash it over somebody's head. Now, obviously, we'd gone to an awful lot of trouble in making sure that we got identical chairs, but one of them had been made out of balsa wood or something, whereby the actor being hit wouldn't get hurt. And it was always set in the same place. And I went in to watch for the very first performance at this matinee. And during it, you could see the moment getting closer. And he went and picked up the wrong chair. And at which point my mind started leaping ahead as to what was going to happen next. Were we going to see blood on the stage? Were the children in the audience going to be traumatized by what they saw? And in the end, I think he had to pretend he'd hit the guy with the chair because he realized, having picked it up over his head, that it was too heavy.
Right.
But of course, I saw it before he saw it, but he'd picked the wrong chair. So your mind races ahead as to what could go wrong. And then there are things that are going wrong. I've had a couple of incidents in my life with doors, and I think you were vaguely involved in one of those, Jamie.
Oh, yes. I think I have. We've discussed it. Who did I discuss it with? Jenny Holmes, because we couldn't remember who exactly it was that was responsible for it.
Paul Field. Oh, sorry, Paul, but I'm telling the story. It was Paul Field who pushed open the door, coming in very distressed, at which point the door fell off its hinges. It was a swing door. So there is that.
You were super perfect. I remember that because I think I was sat in the wardrobe window thinking, and I remember you picked it up off the floor and just put it at the side.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And carried on.
I have to tell you, I could have said something at that point, but I refrained from doing so because I thought it would have got a laugh, and I knew that Paul was about to embark in a quite emotional speech, and I thought, well, it's going to upset the whole bunch if I say what I would like to say. But I was professional, Jamie.
You were. I say you cleared it up and got on with it.
I have another story about that same production. There was a line.
This was Glengarry Glen Ross.
Glengarry Glen Ross, and I had a line in there right towards the end of the play, which I was unable to say. And it was one of those situations where, when I first read the play, I clocked this line and it made me laugh. It came up with all kinds of images. And unfortunately, that stayed with me. And throughout rehearsal, we would get to the edge of this line, and either myself or Paul Field, who was on stage with me at the time, would collapse in laughter. In the end, we had to change the line because it was impossible to say. And it's not a very PC line, probably.
Probably not. I've got to say this. So this is Glengarry Glen Ross, where quite a lot of the words in it are the same word, and it's not one that we will introduce here, but I'm sure people can understand which one it is.
Yeah. But the line came right at the end of the play. Again, a very emotional point, where Paul Field had just been caught out as being responsible for stealing. And I was trying to cheer him up, and I wanted to take him out for a meal. But the line written was, "Why don't we swing by the chinks?"
Yes.
Well, it conjures up all kinds of images in my mind, and I'm afraid that's probably my mind. So we went through rehearsals, and you probably remember this, where we never, ever got through that line. In the end, I had to change the line because I just couldn't say it. But by changing it, that had its own difficulties because you still knew what it should have been. And I think the two of us couldn't look at each other when that line was delivered.
I've got to say, I think there were a couple of those because I remember a spoonerism of one line towards the end of that show that you and Matt Sweatman were on stage for. And in one rehearsal, you spoonerismed it and did it the wrong way around. And again, I can't really say the words because it's a supremely offensive line. But I remember, but we all fell in pieces laughing, and I think we lost probably 2 rehearsals to that line.
I don't remember that. You must tell me when we're off this.
I shall write it down for you off air. But yes, I remember that being very, very funny. And every night during the production, every time we got near that line, I was just waiting for somebody to laugh it up, and it never happened.
Matt Sweatman and I had a few problems not laughing in that production, I have to say. I can think of another one that happened in rehearsal, where something fell off a cupboard, and he bent over to pick it up, and as I was in the middle of a line, and I was turning away, and I turned back to say the line, something like, "I'm going to have your ass." And there in front of me was his ass. At which point everything came to a stop.
Yeah, I mean, those are really good. I remember I can remember moments like that in rehearsals from productions better than I can remember anything about the actual play or anything around about that time.
Oh, numerous things in rehearsals, numerous. And again, you can't really go into all of them. Some of them aren't really what should be repeated, but
no,
yeah, lots of those.
Some are quite tame, but yes, some are unrepeatable. What would you like to see in the future for the theatre? What would you like to see it become? Or
I would certainly like to see a younger audience attracted. I mean, our audience at the moment is middle-aged onwards, I would say. And I think it's healthy to have a younger audience. But by the same token, I wouldn't want to see that older and loyal audience lose out in any way. And it's getting doing a balance of things over a year that hopefully would keep both satisfied. But more than that, it's the quality of what you do. It's not enough to say we're doing Hamlet unless you're going to do it well. And I think it's keeping the high standards is going to be a challenge, I think. And I suppose, harking back to what I said earlier about trying to come to something of an ensemble company, where you've got a regular company working in similar ways, because working together in that kind of way can bring extraordinary results. And I'd love to see that. And I've got to say that's my greatest regret, that that hasn't happened in the time I've been there. And it's a challenge, but it's a major challenge, I think.
Do you think it's a realistic goal with an amateur theatre where you're so reliant on people giving up so much of their time? Do you think you'd be able to do that without paying them?
I think you could do some of it. You certainly couldn't do all of it. You couldn't work in the kind of way that a director like Peter Brook works with his company, whereby they rehearse fairly solidly for months, and you can't ask our actors to do that, simply because we've got a season to put on, and because some people will be needed more than once within a period of three or 4 months. Peter Brook does that and does it brilliantly, or has done that and has done it brilliantly. I mean, that would be ideal, but that's never going to happen. But I think there are ways in which we could work in the same way. We could have the same kind of approach, the same understanding of what is the job of an actor. And then perhaps we need to find a way of getting some guidance as to what you do in order to complete that job satisfactorily. The help's out there and we can find it. I'm sorry it's not happened before now, and I think you're right. It's perhaps an unrealistic expectation, but I think there are things that we could do. But it needs everyone to buy into it, and until that happens, it's not going to change dramatically.
You mentioned having like a balance of different types of plays that would appeal to different audiences. We haven't mentioned this. You were director of productions for a period.
Yes, I think I had 2 stints at that in the 80s, I think. Yeah,
I think late 70s and 80s, I think. Early 80s.
Early 80s, and then I did a stint later 80s as well, I think.
It's possible the position was only listed in a certain in certain periods of like the program, so the archive doesn't actually capture that, apart from when it did in various programs. So I think, we don't have a full record of that. But that, I mean, it's a big job. That it's, balancing a lot of people and a lot of resources against productions.
Well, yes, I mean, you've done the job as well, Jamie. You know what's involved. Basically, your phone doesn't often stop ringing. And again, if you've got a life away from the Criterion, it can impinge on that quite dramatically. Putting together a program of plays, it takes an awful lot of preparation, an awful lot of reading, an awful lot of phoning around, getting the rights, finding the cast and directors and things like that. It's a massive job. It's not something I would ever tackle again. And my hat goes off immediately to people who have done that, because I know what's involved. And people like Jeff Bennett, Keith Railton, who have both done that job for a very long period, and Woodward as well as another one, done that job for long periods of time. I'm staggered that anybody's been able to keep it going for any length of time. It's a massive job.
Yeah, I think I did 3 years, and I think that was about the absolute. I could not do any more than that, I don't think.
No. I mean, my feeling was that it should change on a fairly regular basis anyway, that no one person should have to do that for any length of time. And like you, I would say 2 or 3 years is probably a reasonable time to do it. Beyond that, I think it's asking an awful lot.
I think it's good as well, because then you get a variety of different things. I mean, there are lots of
Absolutely right. And different directors will choose different plays. and they'll go about putting them on in different ways. That's very healthy. And, you know, sometimes, you know, we see a season and you think, well, I don't like that much, but that's your own feeling about it, and everybody will have a different opinion. And it's highly unlikely that you will get a season of plays where every play in that season is going to please every member of your regular audience. It won't happen. And I've always accepted I will go and see every play that I can there. And generally speaking, on balance, I would say I've seen a lot of very, very good things and a few things that not really my cup of tea. There's nothing wrong with them necessarily. It's just not the kind of thing that gets to me. But there's every reason why they should be part of the program. For example, I mentioned before, Let the Right One In, about vampires, which did nothing for me whatsoever as a play. The production did, the play didn't. But an awful lot of people found that really fascinating and enjoyed it as a play. And that's how it happens. You know, sometimes I like the play, not the production. Sometimes I like both. Sometimes I'll hate the play and like the production. But, you know,
yeah, I mean, I think
fine.
that's what's great about the Criterion, that like I absolutely hate farce. I find it awful to watch, and I'll go and see it, and yeah, as you say, it's like, it's through no fault of anyone. It's just something that I don't particularly enjoy. Some
No,
people some people feel the
yeah,
same about musicals, and you
yeah.
know, they just have a sort of, you know, children on stage sets my teeth on edge. You know, it's not their fault.
No,
Um,
no. I mean, I like that variety, even though I may not particularly like everything that goes on. I don't mind seeing it.
hmm,
Sometimes before the end of the evening, I'm kind of ready to go, but you know, that's going to happen anywhere, not just at the Criterion.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, doing different things, you know, if you take something, you can take something away from everything, and talk about it. I mean, that's, I say that my great joy of being at the Criterion has been involved in doing plays, but mostly it's been in the bar talking about, you know, what we found interesting, what we didn't, and you know, what we liked,
Yeah,
what we didn't. And
yeah. I mean that's always a strange one, isn't it? When you've done a production there, it's always the walk to the bar afterwards, and whether you'll be greeted and swamped with congratulations or whether people will quickly move in another direction, and that's something that is unique to amateur theatre, and particularly to clubs like ours, whereby, you know, all your friends are going to be in there, and sometimes you think, oh, I didn't like that, because you're all so close. And actually, it doesn't really matter, because somebody doesn't like something doesn't mean they're not still your friend.
no,
Um, you know, that's fine by me. I don't mind if anything I've been involved in and somebody doesn't like it. That's entirely their decision, their opinion, whatever. And you know, obviously one wants everyone to like it, but that's just not going to happen. So,
I'm going to list all of the things that I've hated of yours in the comments at the bottom of the video, so that people can see that.
oh, thanks, Jamie. Thanks very much.
It would be bad manners to say out loud, but I'll write them all down at the end.
Well, it would be bad manners, because I've been very careful not to mention any of your productions.
I know that there's one that I was kind of vaguely, I think I was very young when I did it. I think there was a production of Adrian Mole, which
Of what? Adrian Mole.
yeah, which I thought I did an all right job, but that was because I was like 15, 16 or something, and it was really bad. I think I've learned since then that it was not great, and that I was not great in it.
I only vaguely remember it. I mean, we're going back a long way.
That's good. That's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
that must have been early 90s or something.
that would have been early 90s.
Yeah, yeah, 93 maybe.
Yeah, I vaguely remember seeing it, but more than that, I can't remember much. It couldn't have been so bad that I would remember it. But there are some from a while back that I have to say are so bad that I remember them.
Yeah,
Um,
there are some that are legendary as being like, oh yeah, that's the worst thing we did. And some of those, it's pretty much universal. Everybody kind of, hands up. Yeah, that wasn't great.
I think I know one of them that you may be talking about, but never mind. We won't go into that.
Well, it's been lovely to talk to you. Um, I should let you get on. I'm hoping to be able to see you soon in the building, when when it sort of opens up again, which we look like we're heading
Well,
towards.
it seems to be starting. I mean, we've had one production. We've got another one coming up at the end of the month. The bar is now open, although it's all socially distanced. Not that that's been a problem from what I've seen when I've been going down there. But I'm doing my best to get down to the bar and see people again. And it would be nice if others gave it a go. It'd be nice to meet up with people again after such a long time.
Yeah, I say, especially given, it's an anniversary year, it'd be really nice if we could actually
Yeah,
get like a big event in by the end of the year.
sure, sure.
That's sort of out of our hands, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
But lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much for sharing those.
Right, nice to talk to you, Jamie. And I really want to know what that spoonerism was.
We'll talk about it in a second. Thanks, John.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.